I never imagined that a routine night drive could unravel into something so deeply unsettling. It began as a straightforward trip to the next town for a meeting. The weather was clear when I left my house, and the drive seemed like it would be uneventful. But as I ventured further from home, the skies began to darken, and an unexpected thunderstorm erupted with alarming intensity. The rain hammered against the windshield with a ferocity that made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The wipers, struggling to keep up, created a relentless rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. Every flash of lightning provided a brief, blinding illumination, revealing the landscape in stark, disorienting flashes before plunging it back into an oppressive darkness. The road was deserted, with no streetlights for miles. The trees on either side appeared to loom menacingly, their branches twisting and writhing with each gust of wind. As I drove deeper into the storm, I began to feel a growing sense of unease. The landscape, which had been familiar during the day, now seemed alien and hostile. The storm's intensity only heightened my anxiety, and my thoughts raced, trying to distract myself from the growing sense of foreboding. About halfway to my destination, I noticed an unusual shape in the middle of the road. I braked sharply, skidding through the standing water. My heart pounded as the car came to a stop just inches from the obstruction. Straining to see through the rain and the blurred headlights, I made out a figure, someone standing motionless in the middle of the road. I honked the horn repeatedly, but the figure did not move. Each flash of lightning briefly illuminated the figure, revealing little more than a dark silhouette. The figure's head turned slightly, as if acknowledging my presence, but it remained stationary. There was something unsettling about the way it stood there, as if it was waiting for me to make a decision. The sense of danger was palpable, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. In a panic, I threw the car into reverse and skidded back, the tires splashing through the puddles. As I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw that the figure had vanished. The storm continued to rage, and I drove further into the darkness, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. My pulse was racing, and I found it difficult to calm my nerves. The noise of the storm seemed to grow louder, and suddenly I began to hear strange, muffled sounds that seemed to come from all directions. They were faint but persistent, cutting through the roar of the rain and the rumbling thunder. My anxiety spiked, and I decided to pull over to the side of the road, hoping to get a better sense of what was happening. I stepped out into the rain, the cold droplets hitting me like icy needles. The noise was still there, a series of faint, indistinguishable sounds that seemed to be carried by the wind. I scanned the area. The road was empty, save for the trees that swayed violently in the storm. The whispers and murmurs continued, growing louder and more distinct with each passing moment. It was as if the storm was carrying voices from somewhere in the dark. My breath came in shallow, rapid gasps as I moved cautiously along the road, trying to determine the source of the unsettling sounds. Every creak of the trees, every rustle of leaves, seemed to add to the eerie atmosphere. As I walked further, the noises became more coherent. It was almost as if I could make out words, but they remained frustratingly out of reach. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement or disturbance. The shadows cast by the trees seemed to twist and shift with every flash of lightning, creating a nightmarish play of darkness. Suddenly, I noticed a shadowy figure emerging from the edge of the trees. The figure moved with an unnerving slowness, its movements deliberate and deliberate. Its eyes gleamed eerily in the sporadic flashes of lightning, reflecting a cold, unnatural light. The sight sent a jolt of terror through me. I froze for a moment, paralyzed by fear. The storm continued to batter me, but my focus remained fixed on the figure. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if urging me to understand something just beyond my grasp. The fear overwhelmed me, and I stumbled back toward the car, my heart racing with every step. The rain pounded harder as I fumbled with the car door, my hands slick with water and trembling uncontrollably. I finally managed to get the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut behind me. I locked the doors quickly, my eyes never leaving the area where the figure had appeared. The shadows and the eerie gleam of the eyes seemed to linger in my mind. I threw the car into drive and sped off, my heart pounding with each passing second. The storm's intensity seemed to subside slightly, the rain turning from a torrential downpour to a more manageable drizzle. The road ahead was still dark, but the sense of immediate danger had lessened. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the shadowy figure following me, but the road remained empty. As I approached the outskirts of town, the first signs of civilization appeared. Streetlights flickered in the distance, and the glow of a gas station promised safety. I pulled in, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering dread. The gas station attendant looked at me with concern. "You all right? I heard about some strange activity on Route 12. I nodded, too shaken to explain the full extent of what had happened. I filled up the tank, my hands still trembling. Nearby, a small newspaper stand caught my eye. I picked up a copy, hoping to find some information about the incident on Route 12. The front page headline read, "Mysterious Incident. On Route 12, Police Investigate Abandoned Vehicle." I put the newspaper down, feeling a chill run down my spine. The storm had passed, but the unsettling experience of that night remained with me. The memory of the shadowy figure, the eerie gleaming eyes, and the disorienting noises haunted my thoughts. As I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and inexplicable had followed me. The next time I took that route, the sense of unease returned, a constant reminder of how quickly a routine journey can turn into a chilling ordeal. I still remember that stormy evening like it was yesterday. It was one of those nights when the rain lashes down with a ferocity that seems almost personal, as if the sky were waging its own battle with the earth. I had been savoring a quiet evening at my favorite cafe, a cozy haven nestled on a quiet street. The cafe, with its warm, dimly lit interior and the gentle hum of soft music, was my refuge from the chaos outside. As I sat by the window, I watched the rain pour down in torrents, each droplet racing to catch up with the one before it. The cafe's windows, fogged up from the warmth inside, framed the tempestuous scene outside like a living painting. The raindrops splashed against the glass, creating a soothing rhythm that mingled with the soft clink of cups and the low murmur of conversation. I sipped my coffee, feeling the rich, aromatic steam rise to meet my face. It was a blend of dark roast and a hint of vanilla, the kind of coffee that feels like a warm hug on a cold night. The warmth of the cup in my hands contrasted sharply with the icy chill of the storm raging outside, creating a comforting cocoon of warmth and tranquility. As the evening wore on, the storm showed no signs of letting up. The darkness deepened, and the cafe's warm glow became a beacon in the storm. It was a peaceful interlude, but eventually the time came to leave. Night had begun to fall when I decided it was time to head home. The sky had transformed into a turbulent mix of dark clouds and flashes of lightning that illuminated the horizon in a ghostly light, as if the heavens were tearing apart at the seams. I settled into my car, the heavy rain splattering against the windshield with increasing intensity. As I turned the engine over, the storm seemed to grow more intense with each passing minute. The wind howled and the thunder crashed with such force that it felt as though the heavens themselves were at war. The sound of the rain battering against my car was deafening, and the windshield wipers struggled to keep up with the deluge. As I drove along the winding roads, the storm raged around me, creating an eerie, almost surreal atmosphere. The rain had turned into sheets, blurring my vision and transforming the road into a river of dark, swirling ink. My headlights cut through the torrential downpour, casting fleeting beams of light that barely penetrated the oppressive darkness. Each flash of lightning revealed only the fleeting outline of the road and the surrounding forest, making every moment of the drive feel like a leap into the unknown. Suddenly, amidst the storm's fury, something unusual caught my eye. A small, dilapidated cabin stood at the side of the road, its silhouette barely visible through the driving rain. The sight was so incongruous and out of place that I felt an odd compulsion to stop. Maybe it was the storm playing tricks on my mind, or perhaps it was sheer curiosity. Whatever the reason, I decided to pull over and seek refuge in the old cabin until the storm passed. The cabin's appearance was unsettling. It looked as if it had been abandoned for decades, its wooden planks rotting and the roof sagging under the weight of the storm. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, and the dim light from the storm outside barely illuminated the interior. I hesitated for a moment before stepping inside, the darkness and disarray of the cabin intensifying my sense of unease. The interior of the cabin was just as neglected as the exterior. Dust and cobwebs clung to every surface, and the floorboards creaked ominously under my weight. The only source of light was the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the cabin in fleeting, eerie bursts, casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. The storm's howling wind was muffled slightly within the cabin, but a deep, unsettling silence still hung in the air, punctuated only by the distant roar of the tempest. I sat down on an old wooden chair near a cold, stone fireplace, hoping to find some comfort in its emptiness. The fireplace was filled with cobwebs and dust, its once warm hearth now cold and barren. As I tried to relax, the oppressive silence was interrupted by a faint whisper. It was so soft and almost imperceptible that I wondered if it was just the storm playing tricks on my senses. Yet, there was something undeniably unsettling about it. The whisper seemed to come from somewhere within the cabin, though the darkness made it impossible to discern its source. My heart began to race, each beat growing louder in the quiet of the cabin. I stood up, my nerves jangling, and moved cautiously toward the door. The whispering continued, growing fainter as I approached the exit. With a mounting sense of dread, I pushed open the door and stepped back into the storm, the rain now pounding against me with renewed intensity. I glanced around the cabin's surroundings, my eyes scanning the storm-swept darkness. The trees swayed violently in the wind, their branches twisting and turning like skeletal fingers reaching out from the gloom. That's when I saw a shadowy figure lurking among the trees. It was barely discernible against the storm, its form shifting and wavering with the storm's fury. The figure was dark and indistinct, but it seemed to be watching me, its presence unsettling in the flickering light of the storm. Panic surged through me, my breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. I scrambled back to my car, my thoughts racing as the whispering from the cabin echoed in my mind. I slammed the door shut and turned the key in the ignition with trembling hands. The engine roared to life, and I sped away from the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest and my mind reeling with the night's eerie events. The drive home was a blur of rain and darkness, the storm showing no signs of abating. Every flash of lightning seemed to cast the shadowy figure into sharper relief, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being pursued. The road ahead was a treacherous expanse of shimmering water, and each turn felt like a descent into deeper anxiety. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that dark form following me through the storm. By the time I finally pulled into my driveway, the storm was still raging with unrelenting fury, but I was profoundly relieved to be home. I closed the door behind me and locked it, the sound of the storm outside a constant reminder of the unsettling encounter. As I settled down in the safety of my living room, the roar of the storm seemed to drown out my thoughts, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back from that old cabin. The whispering, the shadowy figure, it all seemed like a nightmarish blur, a chilling reminder of the storm's power and the unsettling secrets that might lie hidden in its fury. And so I sat in my dimly lit living room, the storm still howling outside with an almost malevolent persistence. The wind screamed through the cracks in the windows, making the house shudder as if it were protesting against the storm's relentless assault. The rain lashed against the glass in a relentless torrent, the rhythmic pounding creating a hypnotic drumming that seemed to echo the unease I felt inside. The shadows in my home grew longer and more distorted with each passing hour, as if the storm outside were somehow influencing the very fabric of my surroundings. The flickering light of a single lamp cast eerie, dancing shapes on the walls, making the familiar room seem alien and unsettling. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind, seemed to whisper secrets from the storm, heightening my sense of foreboding. The night's events hung over me like a dark cloud, a persistent reminder of the fear and unease that the storm had unveiled. I could only hope that the dawn would bring a sense of normalcy and relief, but until then, I was left to grapple with the unsettling echoes of the night, the storm's power, and the mystery that lay hidden within its tempestuous embrace. It was one of those endless nights in the office, where the fluorescent lights buzzed monotonously overhead, casting a pallid glow over the empty cubicles. My shift had started at 11 p.m., and it was now well past 3 a.m. The office was eerily silent, except for the occasional hum of the air conditioning and the distant clatter of the janitorial staff. I was the only one left in the building, a solitary figure hunched over my desk, poring over spreadsheets and reports. The rain had started softly, a gentle patter against the windows. I barely noticed it at first, too absorbed in the monotony of my tasks. But as the night wore on, the rain grew more insistent, its rhythm changing from a soft murmur to a relentless drumbeat. It was comforting in a way, a reminder that the world outside was still moving, even if my own was grinding to a halt. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3:30 a.m. I was exhausted, my eyes stinging from staring at the screen for so long. The rain had intensified into a torrential downpour, the once quiet patter now a deafening roar. I could see the water streaming down the windows, blurring the view of the darkened street below. Lightning occasionally illuminated the scene, briefly casting stark, eerie shadows across the office. I decided it was time to leave. The office had been my refuge, but now it seemed to close in on me, its walls feeling heavier, more oppressive. I gathered my things and switched off my computer, the silence that followed feeling almost unnerving after the constant hum of the machine. With a sigh, I walked to the entrance, the echo of my footsteps seeming unnaturally loud in the empty space. As I stepped outside, the rain hit me with a fierce intensity. It was no longer a gentle shower but a violent storm, the kind that seemed to rage with a life of its own. The wind howled, whipping the rain into a frenzy. My coat was soaked through almost immediately, the water trickling down my neck and soaking into my shoes. I fumbled for my umbrella, but the wind twisted it out of shape, rendering it useless. I began the long walk home, the rain assaulting me from all directions. The streets were deserted, the storm keeping everyone indoors. The few streetlights that were on cast a weak, flickering light, barely penetrating the dense darkness of the storm. Puddles formed on the uneven pavement, and the water surged around my ankles as I trudged through it. The lightning grew more frequent, its flashes illuminating the night sky with brief, blinding bursts of light. Each bolt seemed to bring a new level of intensity to the storm, and with each flash, the shadows grew longer, more menacing. The thunder followed, a deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath me. I felt a growing sense of unease, as if the storm were alive and watching me, its fury directed solely at me. The streets were eerily silent except for the relentless pounding of the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the storm wasn't just a weather phenomenon but something more sinister. At one point, I heard a strange noise, an odd scraping sound that cut through the storm's cacophony. I stopped in my tracks, straining to hear over the roar of the rain. The noise came again, a slow, deliberate scraping, like something being dragged across the pavement. My heart raced as I looked around, my eyes desperately searching the darkness for any sign of movement. Then I saw her, a shadowy figure, barely visible through the sheets of rain, standing just at the edge of the dim streetlight's reach. My breath caught in my throat as I made out the details: a woman, her clothes tattered and hanging in wet, ragged strips, her hair matted and clinging to her face. But it was her eyes that froze me in place. They were glowing and unnatural, eerie light that cut through the darkness and pierced the storm with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get away from her as fast as I could. I quickened my pace, my footsteps splashing loudly in the rain-soaked street. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see if I did. My apartment building finally came into view, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the storm. As I unlocked the door and stepped inside, I could hear the storm's fury still raging outside, but now it felt distant, almost like a separate world from the safety of my apartment. As I settled into the quiet of my living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The storm's fury seemed to linger, a silent reminder that it was not finished with me yet.